When you're looking for KitchenAid innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, will help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified KitchenAid appliances save you energy and money, and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951.
Hi, I'm John Mallos, and welcome to this live edition of Connect with me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this Monday before Christmas. Only 2 days to go before Santa comes barreling down your chimney. Anyway, 436 MeTV option 11. It's on the air, off the presses. We have a young author in the building today. Back with our show in a moment.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
It's on the air, off the presses here on this Monday morning, 2 days before Christmas, and we want to talk about, our guest today. He's a young author, but before we get into that, I want to mention that today certainly is the last day that you can sign up for individual health coverage here in California. It's called Covered California, if you want to be covered by January the 1st. Now, if you don't need coverage, you don't want coverage, then it means nothing to you, my friends. However, today is your last day. Before the end of this program, we will put that phone number up one more time. And don't forget, tonight is the last night ever that a football game will be played at Candlestick Park, a regular season game. The 49ers, of course, will be playing at home on Monday Night Football. If they get in the playoffs, they'll play a playoff game probably at Candlestick, but shortly thereafter, the Wrecking Ball will tear down historic Candlestick Park that's stood since 1960. That's a long time. Anyway, just a few tidbits to throw your way before we get into the topic of conversation on this Monday. In the beginning, it was Murrow. Then it was Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and Frank Reynolds and all the rest. Well, now, my friends, we have 3 network news anchors that, let's roll the videotape and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Not exactly household names across the country. You're looking at Brian Williams, talking about Scott Pelley, and, of course, Diane Sawyer. And, they're on national TV every night, no question about it. But viewership across the globe, across the nation, across the fruited plain is down. Fewer and fewer people are getting their news from folks like these. It's not like the old days where Cronkite was known by practically every man, woman, and child in America, and he became water cooler conversation. How many people do you know who have said recently, "Did you hear what Brian Williams said last night?" No, not really. Technology, social media such as Facebook, Twitter, the internet, cable TV, all the rest have changed our daily viewing habits and how we get news. Miley Cyrus perhaps could be better known than any network news anchor. Also, the ability to go live from anywhere in your city and to go live from anywhere in the world has made a big difference. Live in our studio right now is Bradley Hart. He's a lecturer of mass communications at Fresno State. He has also written a book, my friends. It's called The Foundations of the British Conservative Party. It's selling over in Britain right now. Well, main topic of conversation today will be his viewpoint of how the young people of this country look at media today versus my generation, the old generation. 436 MeTV, option 11 if you want to join the conversation. What's your point of view on this topic? Today it's on the air, off the presses. We're back with our program in just a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Samsung big screen we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an HD 3D web-enabled Samsung TV. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
Back with our program. The book is called The Foundations of the British Conservative Party. It's written by Bradley Hart. He is a lecturer of mass communications at Fresno State. How are you, Bradley?
Doing well. Thank you for having
me. Good to
me.
see you. Hey, thank you. Looking good. Hey, I know your father. I think his name is Dennis Hart.
The more famous of the Harts, yes, absolutely.
So exactly what is a lecture of mass communications? What kind of a title is that over at Fresno State?
It means I get to teach a lot of fun students, teach a lot of fun classes, all that good stuff. So it means that essentially I get to sort of move between courses in the way that I want to.
Right. Well, hey, I forgot to tell you, happy holidays,
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas, Happy
Same to
New
you.
Year, all that stuff. Let me ask you a question, because you come from a totally different generation. You're not even 30 years old yet you're over at Fresno State. You're in a generation that is completely different from the generation that I grew up in television news. Today we're talking about television news, and we talk about that just about every Monday. We've talked about it extensively, of course, with your father. He comes from my generation. How do you view news as it's gathered and delivered in this day and age, as opposed to, I know you weren't around when I was growing up, but how do you view it in your point? How does your generation view it?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. The main trend that I see, certainly among my students, is that news has become much more of an immediate, ongoing thing. It's no longer a sort of hit or miss. There's a newscast on at 6 p.m. If you miss that newscast, you've missed the news for the day. You have to wait until the morning paper or something like that. News is now a 24-hour phenomenon. That's not just cable news. That's also the internet. The internet has absolutely revolutionized the way that my students consume news in every way.
Yeah.
And the big one for them is absolutely Twitter. I mean, they're big into Twitter, even more so than Facebook in a lot of ways.
Got a call coming in. Caller, you're on the air. Good morning. Okay, cut him off. Sorry about that. Apparently they were trying to get through. 436 MeTV option 11. Remember, turn down the sound. So if you miss Brian Williams, if you miss Diane Sawyer, who cares? Because you have a 24-hour news cycle. And do a lot of people in your generation get the news via Twitter or Facebook?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they get the news that way, and what's sort of disturbing as somebody who studies this is that they think that is news, right? That things that happen on Twitter are the same as something that happens on a nightly newscast. And that's absolutely not the case. A good example of that is the Boston bombing took place April the 15th of last year, or of this year, I should say. Essentially, in the aftermath of that, there was a massive amount of Twitter activity talking about the case. The manhunt went on for several days. Remember those very dramatic images. There's a recent study done that showed that 4 out of 5 tweets about that case were not factual. 4 out of 5 tweets being put out about the Boston bombing and its aftermath were not factually correct.
Now, are these tweets coming from people at the location of the bombing?
Well, all of the above, right? People at the location, people who claim to have sources within law enforcement, people who claim to just be listening to police scanners. This is another major thing, right? In broadcast journalism, for decades, people have had police scanners in newsrooms. They can listen to public service channels in that sense. But now many people have those, and they spread the information that comes across those police scanners.
So people are taking, people of your generation, or maybe even mine, taking Twitter messages, such as the case with the Boston bombing, as gospel?
Precisely, yeah, or taking it as a milieu of messages, right? Not necessarily thinking that everything is factual, but thinking, oh, someone is saying this, it has some validity, at least until it's proven to be wrong in that sense.
Now, I will say that Scott Pelley gave a speech earlier this year regarding that specific issue that you talked to, admitting in that speech that we at CBS News made mistakes. We've got to do a better job.
Correct.
Not reporting information that is factual is totally out of the question.
Absolutely.
You can't do that. As a reputable news organization like CBS can't rely on a tweet for factual information. Am I right?
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, we saw this in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook massacre, where obviously a very terrible case, but virtually all of the networks made terrible mistakes on the air in the course of that. A couple of them made a mistake where they actually put up the wrong photo of the alleged gunman because the gunman had a false ID on them at that point.
And of course, KTVU Channel 2, in wake of the Asiana crash, remember what happened with the news anchors putting up the names, the so-called names of the pilots. That's another major faux pas mistake.
Absolutely, just an elementary mistake in the sense of you're in this rush to be first in that sense, and they were the first to be wrong because they went the first on the air with these names that turned out to be essentially false and deeply offensive.
Yeah. So how is it that you and your generation, how do you view news? How should it be handled, in your opinion?
Well, news is an amalgamation of factual information, right? The news industry has always been an industry that's dedicated to going out and gathering factual information and disseminating it to the public in a responsible way. There's always been cases where news organizations, reporters, anchors have known certain things and haven't revealed it to the public because there's no vested public interest in people knowing everything in a lot of cases.
The reason I ask is because, for a person like myself, the generation that I come from, I guess tweeting, Facebook, and I totally disregard it as non-factual to begin with. Is that right or wrong on my part?
I think it's both right and wrong. I mean, I think this is another source of news. This is essentially the raw scanner
So disregarding it totally is also wrong.
I think so. This is another voice, essentially. This is another voice of information.
But how can someone be sure that other voice is factual and accurate?
Well, this is the problem of our times, right? You can't be. It's about consistency in that sense. It's about fitting what you're getting through these other mediums into the other information you have out there. And it's also changed the relationship between viewers and producers in that sense. For a long time in television, there were content producers and there were consumers. Now those consumers have a voice. They can hit back at the content producers.
You just hit something. That's the change. That's the major change, is when Rather, Brokaw, Jennings, Cronkite, any of these people said something, you knew it was right, you knew it was factual, you knew it was gospel.
That's right.
In this day and age, whatever you're hearing, whatever you're reading, you're not sure.
That's right. It may or may not be true.
It may not have any merit to it.
Correct.
That's the difference. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And I mean, if you want a good example of this, look at the 24-hour news channels. I mean, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. These are channels that have blurred the line so greatly between news and entertainment that it's almost indistinguishable now. I mean, when you turn on those channels, you don't really know what's going on, potentially, unless you've been watching for a number of hours and know exactly what program you're in.
Right. We got to take a break here talking with Bradley Hart. He is a lecturer of mass communications at Fresno State. Your phone calls are important. We'll talk about his book, too, The Foundations of the British Conservative Party, 436 MeTV Option 11. It's on the air, off the presses. Call in, turn down the sound on your TV set if you want to ask a question. Now, if you have a programming question, do not call in, because I have no idea what programming is all about on this station. I only know my program. We're back with our guest in just a moment.
Remember me?
After practicing law, Raymond Berg fought crime.
You have the right to an attorney.
As a hard-boiled detective on wheels,
Ain't it the truth?
his name is Ironside.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind saying it again.
His name is Ironside.
All right, now you've said it.
Nothing slows him down.
I want to see this one firsthand.
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
Well, what are we waiting for?
I guess we'll take this call right out of the break here. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. Your question.
Just a comment. In today's day and age, when Severite and Brokaw, you needed to get a degree in journalism, and it was all fact-based. Now it's just sensationalism. You've got a pretty lady on TV making a brief statement about the news, and then it's just comment on the news rather than substantiating it with facts. That was just, in a nutshell, that's how the news media is today, I believe. It's just another, pomp and circumstance. It's really not based on somebody getting a degree in journalism. They just have to look good and read their cue cards. I'm sure if you ask these people what they read after they get off TV, they haven't a clue what they read. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comment. Well, Faye Sidlow was here not too long ago with one of her students, and I asked her about sideline reporters at sporting events, baseball, football games, basketball. To me, it's sideline babble that makes no sense and has no significant impact on the game or even on the viewer watching.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a running joke that I have with my students about sports commentators, that you can know everything you need to know about sports commentary just by memorizing a few token lines, giving 110% on the field, going 1-0 this week. You hear this from coaches, from players. You hear it from everybody. And the sideline reporters, the greatest insight they can offer is, they're giving 110%. They're really trying hard. They're leaving it all on the field.
The only time I think a sideline reporter really comes into play and can really add to the broadcast is if there's a major injury on the field.
Sure.
There's a major delay in a game. I remember the earthquake game, World Series game in San Francisco between the A's and Giants. Of course, they didn't have the sideline reporters back then that they do now. It's at every game there's a sideline reporter. But would you agree that at some point maybe they do come in handy to a certain extent on certain situations?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, certain situations, and at the end of big games, for instance, the end of the World Series, important to have those types of insights from the field in that sense. But the idea of putting a sideline reporter, I think, at every college game, at every game that's really telecast is absurd. I mean, what are these people essentially offering?
Because they're not offering anything.
They're not offering anything, and sports commentators, sports sort of speculators, I like to call them, are essentially just using canned lines. I mean, they're not saying anything new about the game. When you talk to players, all those players have been coached in what to say anyway. They're never going to say, oh yeah, we really did a terrible thing today, you know, we're an awful team in that sense. They're always going to toe that PR line.
Okay, so the students that you lecture at Fresno State in mass communications, what's their main goal?
Main goal
are they wanting to get on the air? Are they wanting to be a broadcaster? Are they wanting to be behind the scenes? What are their aspirations?
Largely to work in the business behind the scenes. There's not a lot. It used to be that a lot of students wanted to be on the air in that sense. I think the glamour of that is largely gone, possibly because there are just so many people that are on the air now.
Too much competition, maybe?
Too much competition. So many available channels now in that sense. I mean, it's not clear who you'd want to work for if you wanted to go into that. It's a very complicated business to know whether you want to work for cable news, for NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, you know, how that even works out in that sense. So, yeah, it's just very disparate in the sense that people don't really understand the media landscape in the way that they used to.
Okay, we got a phone call coming in here. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. Your question.
Yeah, how does he see that evening news going? Because, you know, I still use that as a way of seeing news on a national level that's not internet or the, you know, Fresno Beat or something local.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Because, you know, I mean, because without these, those figureheads, I mean, Tom Brokaw or these people that you see and you respect, you would be inclined to change the channel if they had somebody. I like what they're doing. Question? I think there's still a need for them.
Okay, what's your question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is that does he see that one day we're not going to need the 6:30 news? You know what I mean? When all the national news comes on.
Yeah. No, I don't know. You know, there's been a lot of talk about that. Everybody has an opinion about that. I remember a few years ago people were saying that because of the internet, television is going by the wayside as we know it today, and it's still here, and it's still going to be here 10 years from now. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think we're always going to have a 6 p.m., 6:30 newscast. There's always going to be network news because the vast majority of the audience still consumes those things. There's a great analogy here with print, actually. People said print was dying. You hear this even now all the time. Newspapers are on the way out, magazines on the way out. Remarkable things have happened in the past few weeks. Newsweek coming back into print after going online only. Rupert Murdoch obviously saving the Wall Street Journal a few years back. We have Warren Buffett who's buying up newspapers all over the country. People still believe in print because that's where the dollars still are.
And why is Newsweek coming back? Because I heard that too.
Well, it's coming back into print because it wasn't profitable as an online-only enterprise. And this is what people are realizing, is that the internet is great. The internet has all this immediacy and all these things going for it. There's no money to be made, really.
So the New York Times, Washington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer better think twice if they think they're going to make a profit by going online only, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we're seeing this all the time. Look at the great news magazines, right? The Economist, one of the best news magazines in the world in that sense.
Okay. Another call. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, John. And Dr. Hart, you know, is this on the news? Is it, first it's a statement, is this a liberal and conservative issues that come up? And the first issue is always a liberal slant on the news until, they find out the real issue. You know, I'll give you an example, the latest on Duck Dynasty and what's going on with that, this issue or this event that's going on. And they find out exactly what did happen or what he really did say. But it seems like we'll always get hit. The conservatives first get hit by issues from the liberal side that's saying what they think he said or what he did. And then we find probably 3-4 days later what really took place. So to me it's Republicans against Democrats. That's the way I see it. And who's going to get ahead? Okay, that's it.
Thank you,
thank
Dr.
you.
Hart.
Thank you. You want to comment off that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear this a lot, right? We hear that the media has a liberal or conservative bias depending on who you
We
talk
didn't
to.
hear that years ago. I never heard that growing up.
You heard it in the 1960s, though, when Barry Goldwater runs for president. You really
Not that, but not that much. I never heard somebody say, you know, Cronkite has that liberal stance, that liberal lean to the left when he's delivering the news. I never heard any of that.
But deeply criticized for his stance on Vietnam later on when he essentially calls for the U.S. to withdraw. Lyndon Johnson absolutely hates
But I think you're hearing that more and more now than you did in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly true. What I call this, I mean, he's talking about the Duck Dynasty case. I think that's a fascinating one. This is what I call the outrage machine, essentially, right? This guy gives an interview to GQ, and, you know, why are there consequences to this really at all?
Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I just been watching. I have a question. I'm your age. I'm old school.
Okay.
In my day, at the age of 18 to 25, you were pretty informed on what was going on in the world around you on a day-to-day and monthly or even yearly basis. I speak to a lot of young people in my field, and I noticed more and more these days that no one seems to really know what's going on. They don't have a clue. You bring up a certain topic, and they don't seem to know what it is you're talking about. It's like they're too busy doing what I call thumb-ups. They're looking down at their screens all day.
Yeah.
Not paying attention. And my question, I guess, is to your guest. Do you also find that to be the case? I know he's dealing with a lot of academic students and so on in Fresno State, but does he notice the public not being aware of what's going on around them these days?
Yep. Okay. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it very much.
In short, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely correct. One of the remarkable things about the age we live in is we have the most access to information of any point in human history, right? If you go back 500 years, there was very little information, very little news available, and yet, arguably, we know less about the world than we did a century ago in some ways. Because
even though information is at our fingertips.
Absolutely, but what information, right? Is this relevant information, or is this what Miley Cyrus wore last night to a restaurant in L.A. type of thing?
That's why I said in my monologue. Miley Cyrus is more well-known, I think, than Brian Williams, Scott Pelley, and Diane Sawyer combined.
Absolutely. I think one thing to be cautious about, though, is that as people age, as demographics change, you become more interested in news that is actually factual information, right? This is a phenomenon that's just well-known in sociology, that when you are young, when you are in your 20s in college, you don't have an interest in those things because your world doesn't involve major issues.
Running long. Let's take another call here, and then we'll go to break. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. This is a question for you. 2 weeks ago, you made a comment regarding city of Fresno and the mayor abuse of a dictatorship. Have you ever thought about maybe creating an issue with people to try to recall the city managers and everybody else involved and the mayor? I think that would help out and force them to help the people and give the people information, not just do things behind closed doors. What do you think about that?
All right, let him comment real quick, and then we got to go to break. Go ahead. You want to pick that up? Something about a dictatorship over at City Hall and how we can get a campaign going. I don't know. I don't even know what the question was.
I missed the question there. I don't think I want to comment on that.
I was too busy. I had my head buried in my iPhone. What was the question?
Did you find what Miley Cyrus was doing? Because I'm very interested in that.
Well, let me ask Siri. We're back with Bradley Hart, our guest today, on the air, off the presses. Plenty more to talk about. I'll ask him about Duck Dynasty. We touched on it just briefly. Bradley Hart is the guest. He is the lecturer of mass communications at Fresno State. 436 MeTV option 11. Back with your phone calls in a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Samsung big screen we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an HD 3D web-enabled Samsung TV. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
Gosh, we're back already. You know, this show is interrupting my time on my iPhone, Bradley. I just, that irritates me.
You need to schedule your time better,
obviously. Maybe we need to reschedule this show. I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, all right, all joking aside, Duck Dynasty, what do you make of this fiasco? And that's what I call it. It's nothing but a fiasco. I've never seen the show. I'm not going to watch the show. I have no idea what it's about.
Yeah.
All I know is the fallout about what happened.
I've never seen the show either, honestly. I've seen parts of it. I've never watched a complete episode. It's a show about, well, entrepreneurship, fundamentally. It's sort of the people who are living the American dream. It's people who have created this business.
So this guy, the star of the show, makes these controversial comments.
Yeah.
And so why were they hot-button issues? What were we talking? He was talking about gays and lesbians and what else?
Well,
African-Americans?
I think, there were two parts of it, to my understanding. Again, I haven't read the complete interview. I read some excerpts from it. Essentially made some comments about gay rights in that sense that were offensive to some people. I thought the more significant portion were the sections actually on race, where he talked about sort of the Jim Crow South.
Why is this a big deal in the media?
I honestly don't know. You know why it's a big deal? Because Bobby Jindal weighed in on it. The governor of seriously, the governor of Louisiana weighed in on this issue. Why did the governor of Louisiana have to weigh in on an issue involving...
Because this is filmed in the South.
Well, exactly. So it's a reputational issue in that sense. But then he weighed in to sort of support this guy's right to make these comments in that sense. So, I mean, I think the one thing I would say is people have called this a First Amendment issue. This is not a First Amendment issue in the sense
What is it?
Well, it's not. The government's not stepping in and throwing this guy in jail for his comments. A&E has the right to pull this person off the air if they want to.
Because it's a private company.
It's a private company, absolutely. And if someone else wants to pick up that show, if it's released, then they have the right to do that. But it's not a First Amendment issue fundamentally.
So what you're saying is if I make offensive comments on this program, they can yank me off too. It's a private company.
Absolutely.
Right. Which I probably do every day. Anyway, no.
But you haven't been in jail yet. So
no. But so Duck Dynasty is a big deal because of the offensive comments. And that's why the media has picked up and taken off with it.
Yeah, I don't fully know why the media has taken off with this story, to be honest. To me, it's a celebrity making ridiculous statements, which happens all the time.
All right, before we run out of time, The Foundations of the British Conservative Party. Here is the book right here. We also have a picture of it. You want to put that up on the screen? I do believe we have it, a full screen, and there it is right there. What's this book about, and where can you get it?
You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on any book retailer. This book is fundamentally about the British Conservative Party, but it has important lessons.
Margaret Thatcher?
Margaret Thatcher, absolutely. We start with Benjamin Disraeli. We talk about sort of 19th century British conservatism. We talk a lot about the Thatcher-Reagan relationship, which is incredibly crucial to politics in the U.S. and Britain in the 1980s.
Boy, that goes back 30 years, and there's Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher right there. Some old-style video. Look at that. That's amazing. From back in the 1980s, of course, Ronald Reagan in office from 1980 to 88. And so you talk about the relationship between Reagan and Thatcher?
We do, quite substantially. Very important relationship, obviously. And we talk about the trajectory that conservatism is taking, both the U.S. and Britain. Actually, they're on a very similar path right now. The Conservatives are in power in the U.K. They're in an awkward coalition with the Liberal Democrats at the moment.
You lived in Britain for 5 years.
I did.
Did you work in the media there?
I did not work in the media there.
Okay.
I was a student.
You were a student there. That was a little while ago. But so are the U.S. relations between us and Britain better now or better back then when Reagan was in office?
Almost certainly better then, but it was a different world in that sense. This was the Cold War world. The U.S. and Britain were very closely aligned against the Soviet Union in that sense. Today we have a fascinating situation because the so-called special relationship, the alliance between the U.S. and Britain, is fraying at the edges. And everyone's this. Partially because the U.S. and Britain have divergent interests in a lot of places now. If you want an example of this, look at what happened with the vote over action in Syria, where the British Parliament actually rejected the Prime Minister's call for military action. That's largely unprecedented in British history, that they would actually reject the Prime Minister's motion.
Yes, but it seems to me that when George W. Bush was in office, that we had a closer alignment with Great Britain because of the war in Iraq.
Precisely. Yeah, no, that's absolutely what I'm saying. I mean, look at how it's frayed under Obama and Cameron in that sense, to the extent that actually, and it's actually a grassroots rebellion in that sense. We have the grassroots of the Conservative and the Labour parties opposing what their own leaders want.
Is it because the Obama administration rejects what Great Britain portrays itself in terms of policy? Public policy, political policy, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, possibly to an extent. I mean, I think it's just the evolution of time in the sense that Britain is a very different place than the U.S. It is fundamentally a part of Europe, though a lot of British politicians would deny that and say that it's sort of its own place. But it really is a part of Europe. It has these historical responsibilities to its former empire.
So this book talks about all of that.
Absolutely.
In here, and talks about the relationship between the U.S. and Great Britain back then and now.
It does, and we talk a lot about the 2012 election in the U.S. Actually, we talk a lot about Mitt Romney, and the question we pose at the end is how center-right parties in the U.S. and Britain can adopt to the 21st century. How do they have to change? How do they need to stay the same?
Okay. How much research did this book take you?
About 2.5 years worth. We have an article in there by Sir John Major, actually, former Prime Minister, talking about British politics as of about a year ago. So a very exciting project.
Really? And it took you, what, a couple of years to write? Or
A couple years to write. Yeah, we have a number of contributors to that. It's actually an edited volume, so we have a wide variety of perspectives, and I think we've done a very nice job on it.
All right, Bradley Hart, we're glad to see you. Tell your father we said hi, Dennis, and I hope you have a happy holiday, happy New Year. Good to see you. Thanks for your insight today. I really appreciate it. Bradley Hart, the lecturer of mass communications at Fresno State. That's going to do it for us. We hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. A couple of tape shows coming for the next 2 or 3 days here on Connect with Me. Hope you enjoy them and enjoy your holiday. Have a very Merry Christmas. See you later.